Hi guys, this is John Stark with a very quick tutorial on discussing hair segments and trying to zero in on what is the right number of hair segments to get a natural human drape. And so let's start off by talking what a hair segment is. Uh, and just so you take a look at the scene here, I've got a proxy V4 figure, a very simple basic hair that's not fully draped. I've just brushed it down a little bit so that it's ready to drape, but obviously hasn't yet. So what is a segment? A segment is, think of segments like links in a chain. So the more links that you have in a chain, the more flexible and bendable it is, the more it will naturally curve and curl, and the less angular it will look. And so if we want a nice flowing hair, we're going to need to adjust the number of segments in our chain, or the number of segments in our hair. So jumping into the hair room here, you'll see that when you first go to the general tab for any hair that you load, it defaults with 4 segments per hair. Now, that's obviously ridiculously low amount of hair and not correct, but we're just going to run with that so we can see what it looks like. So I've gone back to the assembly room. You'll see down here that I've got a 1-second animation where the figure doesn't move at all. This is just simply 1 second for the simulation to run and for the hair to settle into a natural location based on the gravity of the scene. So let's go to our simulation tab. We're going to clear any previous simulations that are there. We'll simulate it, and you can see it goes very quickly here, and that's because with 4 segments per hair, it's not complex, it's very simple. So we'll scrub it forward just a bit to the point where it's settled, and there we go. Just a quick test render. I mean, you can tell just looking at the preview that it's not going to be right at 4 segments, but well, nevertheless, we'll do a quick test render. So obviously 4 segments is not enough. You can see that it's way too flat here, it's too flat here, and then we got probably 2 segments here that are flat as well. It just doesn't work. And even though these are multiple strands of hair, and so the flat portions are in slightly different places, ultimately it's all wrong and it's awful, at least for human hair. And you probably thought, well, of course we already knew that for 4 segments. That's way too few. But it still illustrates how the segments work, and so that's why I did it at such a low setting. Let's kick it up to 12 segments per hair. And I'm going to show you another little used tool that you may even forget that you have, but don't, because it is a useful tool. And that is the Even Hair Segments tool. It's sitting up here all by itself, lonely, and it's not used very often, but it really kind of should be. And what this does is, when we change the number of hair segments, whether we put it up or down, or whether we're cutting and styling hair, when you cut hair, you're sort of pushing the segments up together. It sort of randomly shoves them all together, the ones that are already there, and not at all evenly. And so you want them to be even, because you don't want like a large flat area that's just 1 segment and then 3 segments all together real close together, because that will make the hair, it doesn't make any sense. You want it even. So whenever it can't hurt it at any time really to even your hair segments. So I've got all the hair selected already, but even if I didn't, I could just select all my hair segments and just click the Even Hair Segments tool. Just all you have to do is click it, and boom, you've now evened it out so that each segment is the same length and they're evenly spaced. So at 12 segments, let's just jump back into our render room, run a quick simulation. I clear the previous one, and then I run the simulation for the 1 second there, and it drapes, and you can already see that it's draping much more naturally and nicely than it was previously. So I'll scrub forward to the last frame there where it's nice and settled, and we'll do a quick area render there, which would have been faster in the render room, but I'm just doing it here in the assembly room for the purposes of quickly demonstrating. Now you've changed the geometry, not much, but you have made it more complex, so the simulation is going to run a little slower, and renders will be just a little bit slowed down. Not enough to where you would even really notice it, because we're only going from 4 to 12. It's not, even though that's exponentially increased by the number of guide hairs, it's still a fairly low number of calculations to work with. Now you can see that this is way better, but it's still not there yet. This is, I don't know how visible this is on your screens, but this is still just a little too blocky. It's flat on the top here, and it's flat over here, and there's some flat areas that are visible, and also that's true amongst the closer hairs as well. It's just more obvious on the ones that are on the absolute horizon. So it's not quite good enough. And so I just did a little experimenting, adding more segments and rendering them to see where I could find, what the good level would be to make this work. So here is 4 segments per hair. You can see that was what we did already, and so here's 12. We've done these 2, and we know 4 is right out, so to speak, but 12 is not good enough either. I kicked it up to 24 segments here, just doubling it from 12, and really this is really very good, actually. You really have to look close to see the little angles here, but you can see them. But for background animations, where it's not a close-up of the person, let's say this was a background figure that was walking by, or wind was blowing in her hair in the distance, 24 segments is fine. And you can do lots of quick animations at 24 segments that give you a really good idea of how the hair is going to behave and look in higher resolution if you so choose to do that. And you don't even have to choose to do that. You could just run with 24 segments. It is a little tiny bit blocky, and so for close-up animations and for still renders, I think I would go a little higher hair count. So here is 30, just from 24 to 30. There's already a marked difference in the smoothness. There, you really have to look very closely to see any little angular artifacts here on the horizon. Mostly it's very smooth and flowing the way that it should be, and this is really just about the lower limit for what I would do a still render or a single frame render, and more than enough for any kind of animation that's out there, because in an animation things are going to be moving around so much that you really can't see any of this, which is why even the 24 would probably suffice for animation. But I thought I'd just go the other direction and see what it looked like with a really high hair count. So this one was done with 50, and it's pretty much flawless as far as, there's no angular artifacts there at all that are visible. I took it down to 40, and I could see literally no difference between 50 and 40. If anything, I think 40 might be slightly better, because the other sort of side of the coin is the more segments on your hairs, the more collisions that there are to each other, where they can sort of bang into each other. I took it down from 40 to 35, and I see no visible difference between 40 and 35, but 35 is slightly better than 30. I can see a visible difference between 35 and 30, and so for me, this has allowed me to sort of zero in on 35 as being sort of the magic number for what would give a good hair drape or simulation for human hair. Now this is going to vary depending on the length of your hair. So this hair is about 1 foot long. So for me, the scale is sort of like 35 segments per foot gives good hair curve or hair bend, if you will. But if we shorten this up, we would need less segments to make that work. And if we had a much longer hair, let's hair down to her waist, then we'd need a lot more segments to make that still nice and flowing where it needs to be. So that's it for this little tutorial. I'll leave it at that, but I just wanted to discuss the importance of hair segments, and these are not meant to be rules set in stone. This is actually just a guide for that you can sort of see my thinking on this, and I'm not saying this is the absolute best number of segments ever, but this will give you quick simulations that are relatively uncomplicated, and yet where it counts, which is in the rendering room for both stills and animations, 35 is more than enough. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea of where to start, and you can sort of test this yourself and refine it to your own specifications. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you next time.